Hi, I'm R.A. Salvatore, Bob Salvatore. Been writing fantasy books for 25 years now and going strong, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of GenreTainment at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com. We're your hosts, Marks
and Julie. GenreTainment is where we talk about what's happening in the world of film, TV, and web series. We give you interviews with writers, directors, producers, and actors in both independent and not so independent creations. Now for this 96th episode, we are speaking with writer Dean Wesley Smith. He is a USA Today best-selling author with over 100 novels published and hundreds of short stories published as well.
He shares with us how he started his now over 40-year career. He gives us some excellent writing tips from his experience and from his nonfiction book, Writing Into the Dark. He tells us what it's like writing media tie-in books for movie and TV show settings like Star Trek, Men in Black, Quantum Leap, and many more. Mm-hmm. He also talks about his original book series, like his Old West time travel series, Thunder Mountain, his sci-fi space opera, The Cedars Universe, and his superhero series, Poker Boy. Now, I also wanted to mention that I'm having a lot of fun judging for the third year in a row for the Geeky Awards.
Third time's the charm.
Now, if you have a geeky web series, short film, comic book, video game, or tabletop game, then you should really think about entering. Now, if you're listening to this episode soon after it first airs, then you just might have enough time to kind of sneak in there. The cutoff date is June 14th, 2015. If you don't get a chance to enter, then I would encourage you to check out the live streaming award show when it airs in October. You can learn more by clicking over to thegeekyawards.com. That's the Geeky, Geekie, awards.com. And we'll have that web address in the show notes also for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get started with the interview, we should point out that the music you just heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song for our web series, Reality on Demand. It's a song composed and performed by our friend T. Sean Hardy. You can find our web series at realityondemandseries.com. Well, now let's get started with our interview with author Dean Wesley Smith. We're speaking with Dean Wesley Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
We're happy to have you on. First learned about you reading your book, Writing in the Dark, which is a nonfiction book about writing, basically like what most people would call like pantser or writing by the seat of your pants. Basically.
I like it. I'm in the dark in pretty much everything, so might as well learn about writing there too.
For those people who don't know, you're a USA Today best-selling author. You have over 100 published novels, published hundreds of short stories. I believe you've been writing for around 40 years.
Yeah, I published my first short story in, frighteningly enough, 1974. Been going at it pretty intensely ever since.
That's great.
I didn't sell a first novel until 87, so there was some years of learning in there. Which is standard.
One thing I thought was very interesting reading about your background is you didn't really start out in writing at a young age. A lot of authors are like, yeah, I've been writing since I can remember kind of deal.
Yeah.
But you're a little different than that. Can you explain like how you shifted gears in your life towards becoming an author?
Yeah, I basically hated anything to do with writing, just loathed it. I would take classes that didn't have essay tests, things like that. Because I just literally wanted nothing to do with writing in any way, shape, or form. And so the fact that some of my older friends, the fact that I turned out to be a fiction writer is just head shaking to them. I was expected to be a golf professional. My dad was a golf pro. I grew up in golf and in snow skiing. When I got out of high school, I basically went skiing. I was in the early days of what is now called freestyle skiing. Back then it was called hot dogging. I did that for a couple of years and then moved to golf and became a PGA golf professional and was trying to make the tour. And I was a head pro of a country club in Palm Springs, California, and just got bored with it. I'd born and raised in it, got bored with it, went back to college to finally decide, well, I better get a degree in something. So I went to be a golf course architect. And so I have a master's degree in architecture of all crazy things. And then I went on to 3 years of law school. But somewhere back in the early days of the architecture degree, they forced me to take an English class. And I thought poetry for non-majors would be a very good class to take, and worked out that they made me submit a story to a contest. And I got second place in the contest, which is the only person that ever been published out of those poetry for non-major classes. And that got me started. It was basically an assignment in a class that got me to mail a poem. And they hated me in that class. I got a C in the class because I was far too commercial for their taste.
I know how that is, yeah.
Far too commercial. And so the reality was, that's what got it started, and then I just kind of switched over and started working at it. And that was I sold my first poems in 73, 74, and then sold a couple short stories, and then it went downhill from there for a while.
Now, what was the law school? You were thinking for a while you'd be an attorney golf architect?
I have no idea.
That was just bugging me. I had to figure it out.
I have the master's in architecture, and by the time I got done with that, I realized I wasn't going to be a golf course architect. And I just thought, well, we'll try law school. A couple of my best friends from high school had gone through law school, and I'd kind of been around them their last year. And so I took the LSAT and got good score on that, and they let me into the law school there, and which was a really strange thing that they should do. And I went to 3 years of law school, and I dropped out right before the last test of my final semester.
Wow.
So I have 3 years of law school, but I do not have, I'm not a lawyer, not in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I think you're doing all right, so you don't have to worry too much about that.
It comes in handy with contracts and stuff like that.
That's true. You have a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, sometimes just enough to get in trouble.
Yeah. At least you didn't go through 3 years of med school and try to practice medicine. That would be a little more dangerous.
That'd be a lot more dangerous. Yeah,
Cool.
So that's how I ended up as a writer. And it's just kind of been going on ever since. That's been my focus ever since.
So who are some of the writers, and what are some of the stories that have influenced your writing over the years? Or are there any, really?
Oh, yeah, a lot. And the writers themselves, probably more than anything else. I mean, I grew up reading Andre Norton and Burroughs and all of that, and Algis Budrys back in the 50s. I'm 65 years old, and that's when my formative years of reading were in the late 50s and early 60s there. And Algis Budrys wrote a novel called Rogue Moon that was the very first one I remember reading and being just completely blown away by, because I don't think I completely understood it at the age of 10 or something like that. And then Algis Budrys became one of my mentors later on. I was lucky enough to meet him, become friends, and I was one of his people that he helped coming in. The writers, I've been very lucky over the years early on, which is why I do so much teaching and writing books like the Writing Into the Dark book and other books like that, because I had such great mentors. I mean, Harlan Ellison, Algis Budrys, Jack Williamson, Damon Knight, Kate Wilhelm, they were all people that stepped in and helped, and said, Dean, go this way, you might want to think about this, and just offered classes and offered things that helped me, and became friends over the years. I spent many, many years of Saturday afternoons in Damon Knight and Kate Wilhelm's house. That they would do one Saturday a month, and I was one of the invited writers to be able to get to do that. Just things like that, spending time at Harlan's place over the years and listen to, and having discussions about writing and editing and all of that. It just was unbelievable. I mean, I would wake up, I had a bookstore in Moscow, Idaho for a while, and Algis Budrys would come by and, and would stay at the bookstore for a couple of days on his way through. And, it was great. We'd talk about writing all the time. He'd read my stuff and, tell me pretty bluntly what I had done wrong. So I can't pay those folks back, of course. Some of them are dead now, and others they don't need anything paid back. So I try to pay forward, which is what we do in science fiction, is we pay forward, pay to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've also written a number of media tie-in books and settings like Star Trek, Men in Black, Spider-Man, Smallville, X-Men, a whole bunch of them. So how'd you get involved with writing for media tie-in books like that?
Well, I've always been a fan. I mean, and I owned a comic book store with my bookstore.
Oh, cool.
And so, I've always been a comic fan and a media fan. I mean, I'd go home on the third season of Star Trek, the original. I was a senior in high school, and I would go home on Friday night to watch Star Trek instead of doing anything else. So much of a nerd I was. And so, it was one of those things where it was always a love, always a love. I'd sold some novels. Basically, the way into that is you get a career, yourself. And I had sold some novels and a lot of short stories, and I was editing for a magazine called Pope House, which Chris and I started and owned. And I had bought some stories from a young writer by the name of John Ordover. Great stories, very funny. And one day he called Chris to talk about something. She was editing the magazine of fantasy and science fiction at the time. And he called Chris to talk about some project that they were talking about doing. And then he just said, oh, and by the way, they just hired me to be the new Star Trek editor to try to upgrade the Star Trek line at Pocketbooks. Because before that, it was only fans that were writing the Star Trek novels for Pocketbooks. And the quality was all over the map, as you expect. And he wanted to bring in only professional writers to do that. And so he said, well, would you guys be interested in writing a Star Trek book? Well, we had just watched over satellite the feed for the very first Deep Space Nine episode. And we were, of course, fans of Next Generation. And we said, sure. That was the start of it. And I ended up writing, 35 or 40, and I edited for Star Trek for a while for Strange New Worlds. For 10 straight years, I was the editor of Strange New Worlds. That was just great fun. I mean, I just loved it. And I got tired of it after a while, of course, but I just loved it. I probably wrote 30 some Star Trek books, including some ghosted for other writers. In every series, we wrote the very first Enterprise. We wrote the very first Voyager novel, original novels. We were way out front trying to write novels from scripts and pictures, trying to say, well, that's the script of the first episode, and here's some pictures of the cast. Now go ahead and write a novel that the fans will love after the series starts.
Oh,
that was a challenge. We got a couple things wrong. Like we had Tuvok be Spock. That wasn't right. But, things like that. We just had a blast. And then I got into Men in Black by pure luck because I love that movie. And we walked out of the very first Men in Black movie, which used to be a comic book. I don't know if you knew that. Men in Black came from a comic book. And Chris turned to me and she said, you could have written that. And I said, absolutely. And so I ended up, through a series of bizarre circumstances, meeting the editor who had just got the Men in Black novels to do 2 original novels between the movies, first movie and second movie. And basically the assignment was to write a novel that would feel like a movie to the readers. And so I got to write 2 original Men in Black novels. That was just tremendous fun. And I did quite a bit of that. I probably, out of the 100 and some novels I sold to New York, probably 55 or 60 of them are media in one form or another.
Wow. That's fun because, you get to, you're already a fan of something, and then you basically get to just play in that world.
Yeah, we made a couple mistakes early on, and by and large, I ended up writing a lot of them. Chris's name is on a lot of them, but you never could tell who wrote what in any book. What occurred was we took a project that neither one of us were fans of what the project was, and it was just work. I mean, it was awful. It wasn't fun. And so from that point on, we decided we'd only write for things that we were fans of. And that's a major rule. Also, it is much more difficult to write by trying to imitate voices and everything else. I'd rather write my own stuff any day. It's much easier when I'm making it up versus trying to make sure that the fans are going to, hear Kirk and Spock and McCoy and hear them correctly. That's some upper level writing. And so forced us into it very quickly.
Well, because if it's characters you created, who can tell you that, oh, that's not how they talk? Yes, it is. I made them.
Exactly. And so, and especially with hardcore things like Star Trek and Star Wars. Chris wrote some Star Wars and, things like that. But it was great fun over that decade and a half that we did that. It was from 93, I think, and then up until 2005. But I had already stopped writing the books about 2002. But I was still editing for Trek up until about 2005. So it was a fun decade.
Sounds like it.
Was there a specific one you liked better writing in? A specific crew, like Next Generation or Deep Space Nine?
No, I really was a fan of all of them, including Enterprise, the last series. I really was a fan of all of them. I think the book I had the most trouble with was a Quantum Leap novel that we wrote, because we were major fans of Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
But then I started into that, and I had trouble writing it. Chris ended up writing most of that book, simply for the fact that the Quantum Leaps are almost like a cozy or a romance format. There's not a lot of plot. There's just, the plot is, the setup, and then there's not a lot of plot. It's all character.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I've learned how to write those kind of cozy and romance formats where there's plot. But at that point in time, when we got that assignment, I was very plot driven, and boy, that book drove me crazy. But I love the series. No, I don't think there's anything. No one specific. Men in Black, I'd say, would be my two favorite. Those were just way too much fun. Really hit my kind of humor and my kind of mind.
Was there anything you wanted to do in one of those media tie-in books that you weren't allowed to?
Oh, I'm sure there was over the years. Nothing springs to mind because the restrictions were such. But the folks at Paramount Pictures were once I got established after the first 2 or 3 novels, and for a while there was only 5 of us writing Star Trek that in the novel form.
Wow.
Me, Peter David, L.A. Graff, Michael Jan Friedman, Diane. There was only like 4 or 5 of us, 6 of us in the entire stable that were writing these. So we were filling the list. And after a while, the fine folks at Paramount pretty well knew that we were going to follow the rules, that we were going to reset the universe, that we were going to not do something, have a character do something they wouldn't do, because they realized that the 5 of us were all major fans. And we weren't going to mess up the universe. So they gave us quite a bit of leeway as long as we stayed within the confines of writing a Star Trek book for Star Trek. In fact, they gave us a lot of leeway. I wrote a mystery novel set in Star Trek with the Picard went onto the holodeck and played a mystery character called Dixon Hill. Uh-huh. And I wrote an entire Dixon Hill novel where Picard never showed up. He was only in the captain's reports. It was from Dixon Hill perspective, Picard playing Dixon Hill on a holodeck program. And I went through every subgenre of mystery, every chapter. I mean, one chapter would be a cozy. The next chapter would be a castle on a hill with the fog, that gothic. And, I just had more fun, and they let me get away with it.
Wow.
The fans didn't really love it that much, but Paramount let me get away with it.
Which one was that? What was the title?
Oh man, I don't remember the name of it now. Hang on here. I have the covers. A lot of the covers around my ceiling in my office here.
That's a good place to put them.
Not all of them, but some of them. Hard Rain.
Okay.
Hard Rain. It's a next generation novel.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one. That sounds...
Yeah, I love Captain Picard. He's my favorite captain.
Yeah. And Dixon Hill was a great, it was a hard-boiled detective. Dixon Hill played a hard-boiled detective, and it was just great fun. That was a fun book to write.
You also wrote an original one, Starfleet Corps of Engineers series.
Yeah. John Ordover, Keith DeCandido, and I, we kind of brainstormed that into being because the Pocket at that point in the year 2000 wanted to have only an electronic line of books. And they figured in Star Trek would be the best place to do it. This is way ahead of the ebook revolution, back in the Peanut Press and the Pocket Readers and all those things that came and went and failed. Well, Pocket Books decided that they wanted to be out ahead of this and have their own line, and so we brainstormed the Starfleet Corps of Engineers, and I wrote the very first short novel. I think it was a 40,000 some word novel. Called Belly of the Beast. I actually remember the name of it. And it knocked Grisham off the top of the electronic bestseller list.
Woohoo!
Yay! But as Ordover said to me in an email laughing, he said, yeah, that's like being the best hockey player in Ecuador. That was it was nothing at the time. This was the year 2000. We were 10 years ahead of our time. But it was great fun. So they put them into book form too. And then Keith ended up, because I was editing Strange New Worlds for Pocket, Keith DeCandido, the writer, ended up editing the Starfleet Corps of Engineers. And he took that they knocked them down to about 15,000 word novellas per book. But he took, there were 100 of those things. I only wrote the very first one. But they edited quite a line of those things. There was a lot of them.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, in 2000, I don't think I'd ever even heard of the concept of an ebook.
Yeah, in publishing, it was the big fearful thing from about 93, 94 on. Publishing was constantly having meetings about this big electronic revolution coming, but then it wouldn't come. And so for the longest time, they just kept having these, oh, the sky is falling kind of meetings, and then nothing would happen.
It's like Game of Thrones. Winter is coming.
Yeah, exactly. Just nothing would happen, and nothing would happen, and nothing. And so by the time the real ebook revolution actually did hit, they were all tired of it in New York, which is why they got such a slow start out of traditional publishing. Is because they were just, the sky is falling one more time. Oh no! And then when it actually did fall, they weren't ready.
Wow.
Because it had been going on since '95. They were way out ahead of it, and then they just kind of gave up.
Mm-hmm. That was not a wise move.
No.
Now you have multiple original series out there. Let's talk a little bit about a few of those. One of them is a time travel Old West series called Thunder Mountain. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Basically, it's exactly what you said. It's a time travel. It's set in the Old West. A lot of it in mining towns and stuff. But it is from mathematicians, and the main characters are mathematicians and history writing people who want to research history books. That's my main characters in all of these. And it's a very complex world. I try to not do, the standard, oh, she walked into a closet and ended up 300 years in the past. No, this is all basically real science fiction that I'm trying to, and explained by physics of how this could actually happen. And so I'm trying to be very strict on the science fiction elements of it and how it would really work, what kind of time travel would really function. Then I set it in the Old West, and they have, all kinds of interesting issues that happen. So it's dealing with that. It's dealing with relationships. It's dealing with the time. It's literally my best series, I think, far and away. I am writing the 7th book in it right now called Melody Ridge, which is, I had a series of short stories for the longest time about a time-traveling jukebox. This thing was optioned it's still been optioned in Hollywood, actually. Basically, it's a jukebox that if you have a memory from the song when the jukebox is playing, it takes you physically back inside your younger body of the memory. And I've been writing and selling stories in that series since, the 80s. I probably have 15 or 20 jukebox stories that have been in anthologies and magazines and all over the place. And a lot of them won awards. One of them was up for Nebula and things like that. But I never had an origin story of where the jukebox came from. And so then I started writing this Thunder Mountain series. And at one point I went, there's the origin of the jukebox. And so Melody Ridge is combining these two series now. Finally, after 30 to 40 years, I finally figured out what the origin of the jukebox was. And so that's great fun. That's my favorite series of all. I'm writing a big space opera series called Cedars, the Cedars universe. Those are going to be, they're not branded. The covers on them are bad. We went the wrong direction with them to start, and now we're going to rebrand them here this summer. And then my all-time favorite series only has one novel in it, but it has about 60 short stories in it, and that's Poker Boy. Because I used to play at one point or another. In fact, that's how I paid my way through all those years of college, is I played professional cards. For a couple years when I quit writing, I got kind of tired of writing back in the early 2000s, got burned out from the media stuff, and I went and played professional poker for about 2.5 years. And nobody notices that in writing because books are so slow coming out in that period of time that, nobody noticed I was even gone. And we never said anything that, Dean quit and went and played cards. I just kind of came back to writing. Yeah, and nobody noticed. If I didn't tell people I was actually gone doing that for a couple of years, no one would have noticed. I didn't have a blog. It was still traditional publishing. Books were so slow coming out that I still maintained a lot of books coming out. So I have this character called Poker Boy. And he's a superhero. And so it's an entire superhero team. And he's a superhero. His boss is, of course, the god of poker, and Laverne, who is Lady Luck herself. And, they go around saving the world and their team.
So what's his power? Does he have like probability powers, like luck?
Yeah, he can read people. He can teleport. He can be extremely patient. All poker powers.
He knows when to hold him and when to fold him. When to walk away and when to run.
It has a lot of humor in it too. It's an attitude, a lot of attitude. He has some attitude. He usually solves problems by asking stupid questions, and so they're really fun. People just love them who start reading them, and I've got 50 or 60 of them, but we're going to rebrand those this summer at WMG. The Allison and the fine people at WMG Publishing are all rebranding all the Poker Boy stories, and I'm going to be writing more novels than that. And they're going to look like comic book covers on books, only really whacked out, really fun. A wonderful comic book writer and artist by the name of Lee Allred gave us the idea to go this way and kind of did some samples for us. And they're just going to be fantastic. And then they'll stand out. Right now, they just look like everything else I do. Those will be rebranded too. So over this next year, I hope to get the series is kind of rebranded and going out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. What is Cedar's universe about?
Hardcore space opera, galaxy-spanning space opera. It's basically the conceit that humans are alone in the universe. And so I just kind of went, yeah, okay, we are. And then that whole thing from Star Trek, where why do all of the characters in Star Trek have humanoid base?
Mm-hmm.
And and they explained that away in The Next Generation, that there was a race of humanoids, the galaxies. And that's why everywhere they go, there's more humans and more humanoids and, funny four-headed people. and that's all. So they tried to explain it in Next Generation. And I took that idea and said, oh, let's play with that. So the Cedars are the basically a mortal race, but they're humans. And they just seed human populations and then take care of them. So every human population comes up exactly the same and on every planet. And so they do this galaxy after galaxy after galaxy. And I've taken that gigantic scope and tried to bring it down into a human form. But, like one of the ships, one of the books has a big mothership that's out of control and it's going to destroy planets and, mothership the size of a moon and that sort of stuff. It just, it's just great fun. And a lot of them, some of them are set on Earth. Every planet, of course, is called Earth, particularly our Earth, where we have an EMP blast and that the Cedars rescue as many people as they can out of the way of the blast, but it still destroys the civilization. And some of the Cedars come up through that. And so it's just great fun. We will rebrand all of that so it looks like science fiction. Right now, it sort of looks like romance novels because there's relationships in all of them. We went that way to start, and that was a bad idea. Yeah. They're really fun novels, though. I got 6 or 7 in that universe.
And the Cedars, that sounds really interesting. I love good space opera, science fiction.
Yeah, this is major space opera. Major space opera. Galaxy spanning. And I try to be as realistic in the science fiction. That's kind of the way I was brought up with Algis Budrys and Jack Williamson and stuff. So I try to make my science fiction as true to science as I can. Mm-hmm. Just what if this happens or what if this happens? And that's so the romance readers, it was just too much science for them.
Yeah, you want very sciencey science fiction.
Way science. Explaining way too much about the ships and how they get from here to there and all that stuff.
Yeah, I noticed genre is very important in book writing for sure.
Yeah.
What your audience expects, and with the covers too, especially.
Critical on the covers, just critical.
People have expectations.
Yeah. And you don't often get it right, but that's the nice thing about this new world and not dealing with New York. If I'd have sold these to New York, they would have been done. That would have been the end of it. You know? But now with the new indie world and with the presses like WMG Publishing, we can just say, that's not working. Let's run this again. And we can go at it again.
It is nice to have a little more control over your own creation, really. I mean, it's
ability.
Yeah.
It's got to be really interesting with your a few decades of doing this in the industry.
How the industry's changed.
To see how it's changed so dramatically.
I would have been so not in writing at the moment. If I was stuck only in traditional publishing. I as a person with 3 years of law school, there isn't a chance in the world that I would ever sign a modern contract that people are getting offered these days, because I would never sell copyright for the full life of the copyright. Most young writers don't know that that's 70 years past their death. And the agents then are still on the contract if they sell it to a New York publisher for life of copyright. Well, that means that the agent's heirs are going to be dealing with the writer's heirs for way past, maybe into grandkids level.
Wow.
And so, the writers aren't thinking this through. The contracts only became this bad in the last 4 or 5 years. So I would have been so retired. I'd have been selling short stories. I'd have been a short story writer and playing poker. But thanks to the indie revolution, it allowed us the freedom to do what we want to do. It allowed me the freedom to write the kind of books I'm writing. Most of my books now, because I grew up reading books that were 40 and 50,000 words long. That was the standard length of novels for well over a century. I mean, sure, there were a few longer ones, but they were very rare. All of books were just 40, 50,000 words. And it wasn't until New York needed to start raising the price of the books to afford all the New York rent and all the other stuff that they started forcing authors in contracts to write these longer books. Now the standard length of a book for the last 20, 30 years has been 80, 90, 100,000 words. But I grew up in the 50,000 word level. and so when I got the indie publishing, I went, oh, and I just started writing naturally 50,000, 60,000, 40,000 word novels. And I'm very happy with it. And that's just where my mind seems to work in the level of how a story tends to wrap up around 50 or 60. And they always did that when I was writing for traditional too, but I'd have to go back in and pad things out and add plot cycles and stuff to get it up to the contract length. But I'm very happy not having to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
It seems ebooks has really helped bring back this smaller word count.
Well, we sell them in paper too. In fact, our at WMG, our second largest sales is paper through bookstores and things like that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, we're just as well in paper. Paper seems to be stabilizing. Bookstores seem to be stabilizing, which is a good thing. Being indie doesn't mean you can't sell paper. We sell a lot of paper.
I have to say, I still do prefer an actual physical book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Marx makes fun of me. I'm not the most high-tech person in the world. So I like actual books, and I even like, vinyl records if I can get them. There's just something about that I like better.
I think the readers these days are very happy with choice. And that's the fun part about it is the readers now can say, oh, I can read this book on ebook. I can pick up the paper, or I can read it on my computer screen. Mm-hmm. They have choice. And I think readers have now come to accept that they want the choice. Yeah. And so as writers, and if you're doing your own indie or like with WMG, a small, medium-sized press, they need to make sure that they give the readers the format they want in any format, and not restrict the formats or restrict where a reader can find a book. So exclusivity is a bad thing, and so you just make sure a reader can find what they want, because readers are expecting choice now. Yeah. Expecting to be able to read it in paper, expecting to be able to read it in electronic, expecting to be able to read it on their computer if they want. Every reader's different. We as writers in this new world need to make sure that they have that choice.
Mm-hmm. Now, if our audience hasn't figured it out yet, you write like a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
I was really surprised when I found out you even have like a monthly anthology called Smith's Monthly.
Yes, it's an actual magazine. It's called Smith's Monthly, and it has a full novel in it, a serialized novel, and 4 or 5 short stories, and sometimes other stuff.
Wow.
I sometimes threw some of my poems in there just for fun. It's written only by me. I write the entire contents. How's that for an ego? And basically, I'm putting together issue 20 right now, and 21. I've been doing it every month for 21 months now.
So how do you manage to do that on top of everything else that you're writing?
I know, right?
Well, basically everything I write now goes into Smith's Monthly first, unless I have a contract with somebody, or I've offered to be in an anthology or something like that. I'm basically just filling Smith's Monthly. It's about 70 to 80,000 words a month. The novel's usually 40 to 50,000 words, and then the short stories, and then the serial novel. So it's in that range every month. And then I do all the layout on it because I like playing with the layout on the paper. Mm-hmm. And then WMG does everything else. But we sell subscriptions to it. I got quite a few subscribers. It's great fun, and I'm having a blast doing it. And that's where all these novels have been first. And then 2 or 3 months later, we put them out. WMG, I don't do anything. WMG puts them out as a standalone novel. Mm-hmm. And so it's a regular magazine. It's just It's monthly. It's a monthly magazine. I haven't missed a month yet. Knock on.
I'm knocking on wood right now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I was curious about that if you broke out the novels later, because I'm guessing it's multiple genres, that you don't limit yourself to one specific genre, right?
Yeah, it's across the board, and the short stories are always across the board. There'll be a fantasy story with a mystery story with a whatever. Yeah, I have a series going on in there right now. I just finished the third book called Cold Poker Gang. I used to write thrillers under pen names back in for New York. Also, that was what I did after '92 when I stopped writing media. I started writing thrillers, and I did those under pen names that I can't disclose because I signed a contract because they didn't at the time. And it made sense, and it still probably does make sense. They didn't want the best-selling writer blank having reviewers say, well, Star Trek writer Dean Wesley Smith writing as, they didn't want it. So I signed a do not disclose on those thrillers. And so I have a mystery series and a thriller series that I can't tell anybody about, and they're still in print. I'm not writing for them anymore, so they're eventually I'll buy them back from the publisher. But they're still in print and still selling, which is sort of annoying. And and the reality is that in Smith's Monthly I started a mystery series. It's called Cold Poker Gang, and it's they're kind of a little twisted mystery series about a bunch of retired detectives playing poker. There's poker again, and solving cold cases. And some of these cold cases get very twisted, and it's great fun. And those are starting to get pretty good traction in the on the mystery side of things. But I put them in Smith's Monthly first, and then we put them as a standalone novel a couple, 3 months later.
That sounds good. Sounds like make a good TV series too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really like that concept.
Yeah, it probably would. And as soon as I get another couple written, we'll probably give it a shove that way right now. We have quite a few things under option in Hollywood and in different stages of production.
So let's talking about your writing methods and how fast you write, especially. Let's talk a little bit more about your book, Writing in the Dark,
Okay.
Which was part of a really cool story bundle, which probably won't be available by the time this interview goes live. It's almost,
so go ahead and plug away.
Yeah, it's almost about the end. But a very cool bundle of 11 books or so. What's really cool is it's the first book that I've read that focused on the methods that you call writing in the dark, or others might call, writing by the seat of your pants. Basically, not really plotting too much in advance and plotting as you go, I guess, or writing as you go. I'd just like you to talk a little bit more about that book and some of the tricks you share.
Yeah, one of the aspects that someone pointed out to me, it hadn't occurred to me because I've always written this way. Now, I've done a lot of outlines because when you're a media writer, you have to do an outline first that has to get approved by the owner, like Paramount Pictures for Star Trek and stuff like that. But I never look back at the outline. I always just wrote the book, never looking back at the outline, and no one ever compared the book I wrote to the outline that was approved. It just was, no one had time in New York to do that. So the reality is that I've always written this way. My attitude about this is that I want to entertain myself. And I get bored extremely easy. And so if I'm not writing as if I'm reading the book, if I know how the book's going to end, why would I bother writing it? That's my attitude, which is, I know flies in the face of everything taught in every class on the planet. But I'm pretty normal for long-term. Again, there's a group of us that I call long-term professional writers. You've been around for 20 and 30 years. You're a long-term professional writer, especially you've survived all the lumps and the crashes and everything else that go on in publishing. The thought of outlining a book and then writing it, oh, wow, deadly dull. I love reading. I love to be entertained. Mm-hmm. And so when I pick up a book, I read it for pleasure. Another author's book, I read it for pleasure. And then if it's something I want to study, then I go back after maybe a second or third time and look at it, and study what that author's done if they've done some really nifty things. But when I'm writing, I want to have that same experience. Exactly. So I'm just making it up as I go. I am completely making it up as I go. And what I do is I outline after I've written the chapter. I write down what I wrote in that chapter. That's because I have a very bad memory also. And I want to remember what I did back in chapter 6 and who the viewpoint character was in chapter 6 when I'm down on chapter 20. And so I do a little outline, a little hand outline as I go along. So when I finish a chapter, I write what happened in the chapter and who was the viewpoint, and maybe what the character was wearing if I change clothes or something. And that way I'm outlining as I go, but never ahead. In fact, the hardest chapters I have to write is somewhere usually 3 or 4 chapters from the end. I figure out the end. You know, you're sort of like, oh, there's the ending.
Mm-hmm.
And I still got 3 or 4 chapters to get there. Those are just drudgery. Because it's like, no, the ending. Why should I bother? I want to just put it down and walk away. And I'm only writing at that point so that other people can reading it. And that's just not what I do. I write to entertain myself. I also never write critically. I never rewrite, ever. Have never rewritten, except after the first 7 years of my career, which I never sold a story after those first 2, which I did not rewrite. I sold 2 stories in 1974, did not rewrite them, and then learned all the myths of publishing, like I must rewrite everything to death, must polish, and of course never sold a story. And the minute I stopped doing that in 1982 and followed Heinlein's rules 100%, all 5 of Heinlein's rules, I just climbed on board and said, I'm not doing anything but following Heinlein's rules, started selling again. And I have never rewritten anything, unless to editorial demand, and then editors never read the rewritten thing. So usually I would just go in and say, oh, well, I agree with the editor there. No, I don't agree there. I wouldn't touch that. And so I would only do what I thought was right, send it back, and they would always be fine with it. And so basically I don't rewrite, and I just write into the dark. But the key element of writing into the dark is what's called cycling. Mm-hmm. Now, cycling is when you have to, if to understand this concept, you have to basically maybe go watch the movie Slaughterhouse-Five, which was, the book was written by Kurt Vonnegut, but it's easier to see it in the movie. It's an interesting movie, but the main character, Billy Pilgrim in that movie, is unstuck in time in his own life. He jumps around to his birth, to his death, to events that happen in the middle, and so he's always jumping around in his life. He's unstuck in time. Well, novelists, we don't have to write the book the way a reader reads the book. There's no rule anywhere that says we must start on word 1 and write to the end. We don't have to do that. And so what I do is I cycle. I'll write 4 or 5 pages into the book, kind of bog down, kind of go, oh, I wonder where this is going, and I will jump out of the timeline of the book, and I will go back 4 or 5 pages, about 1,000 words or so, and I'll read through the book again, touching things, maybe fixing something, maybe adding a little more detail, and that'll get the book solidly in my head, and then I'll be able to power forward another 4 or 5 pages, and then I stop and do it again. So my process is I'm always out of the timeline of my book, jumping back and forth. And so if I get to some place and say, oh, that needs to be fixed, what I instantly do is go back and fix it. I don't wait for a second draft. I don't do any of that stuff. So when I'm done with the book, I never look at it again.
It's basically you're writing and rewriting at the same time, rather than concentrating on writing it first and then going back and rewriting.
Yeah, because the going back and rewriting means you go back in critical voice. You never want to write a book in critical voice. You want to stay in creative voice all the time. And so by doing it at the same time like that and just cycling back, it's always first draft. I'm always just constantly touching it in creative voice, and I never allow myself to go back as a critical, because I got a pretty large critical brain because I teach so much and try to explain to writers so much how you do something, that I never want to let that voice get near my writing.
And also you're able to keep a train of thought. And it's almost like stream of consciousness, rather than saying, oh, that's a good idea, but I'm not at the rewriting phase yet, so I need to wait.
Yeah, because you'll forget it. It won't be the same. It won't feel the same, and you'll let the critical voice in. And critical voice's job is to stop you. That's why humans have a critical voice. Our critical voice is our protect mechanism. And so if a critical voice is going to do anything, it's going to dumb it down, and it's going to eventually say, oh, I should never mail that. That book's bad. No, you just finish it and get it off to readers and then work on the next one. And it also makes it a lot more entertaining. So, and I don't type fast at all. I'm a very slow typist. I only type with 3 fingers on each hand. I never learned how to be a touch typist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a very slow typist. And but the key with writing fast that most writers don't understand is writing fast means you spend more hours in the chair. And so I'll spend 45 minutes and then I'll take a break, and then I'll spend 45 minutes and then I'll take a break, and then I'll spend 45 or 15 minutes here and 20 minutes here. break it up, whatever. And I just spend more time than other people, which is why I write more.
I like this. I understand how your brain works when you're talking about, going through and cycling and not being critical, because I have that problem where I'm so critical that I can't do anything, because everything I do I think is crap.
Yeah. Oh, I believe that about every word I've written since 1982. Because the minute I stopped rewriting and I would mail it, I was 100% convinced that everything I wrote was complete crap. And editors would buy it, and people would love it, and and I've sold 17 million copies of my books, and and been on every bestseller list. I don't like claiming the New York Times bestseller list, but I've been on it a number of times. I like the USA Today list because it's a better list. I know the mechanics behind the list. That's why I like saying I'm a USA Today bestseller. But the truth of the matter is that I want to entertain myself. Mm-hmm. And rereading one of my own books, why would I do that? I've read the damn thing. Yeah. So,
you know how it ends.
Yeah, I know how it ends. So I don't want to read it. I want to write the next one. I want to be entertained by the next book. Or I'll go pick up somebody else's book and read it.
Mm-hmm. One thing I wonder about mysteries, though, do you have to break that rule a little bit with mysteries? Well, because a lot of mystery writers, their suggestion is that you have to know the ending first and work backwards.
Yeah, boring. No, I don't have any idea. In fact, I'll often come out, I'll be 150, 200 pages into a novel. I'll come walking out of my office, and Chris will be sitting reading or doing something in the kitchen, and I'll come walking out and say, I have no idea how this book's going to end. None. And it's a very, very basically my joy in life is trying to write myself into a corner. Mm-hmm. And then, and then I'll usually, if I'm stuck on something, I'll say, okay, I'm going to sleep on it. And then tomorrow morning, my subconscious will know the answer to this. And 99.9% of the time it does. Now, I very seldom put something away because I can't figure it out.
Does the cycling help, though? With mystery, there needs to be some, evidence or a character placed at some point earlier in the story who did it, rather than, at the end, here's this guy that we never mentioned before, and he did it. So the cycling, does that pretty well take care of?
I have learned that if you trust your subconscious and your subconscious has been absorbing story since when you were sitting on your parents' lap and they were reading to you. Mm-hmm. It's absorbed story. The key is the critical voice won't let it out. If you can get the critical voice out of your way, your subconscious knows story. I cannot begin to tell you how many novels I have written into the dark that I'll be going on and I won't go back and take anything out. I'll add to and other stuff because I know my subconscious put it in there for a reason. And I'll be going along, and by God, by the time I hit the end of the book, if that opening completely set up the ending, and I had no idea that I was writing it. I had no idea that it was setting it up that way.
So my subconscious just trust your instincts.
Story, you just have to trust it. And the hardest part for writers to do is to get that critical rewrite voice out of their head and trust the back of their brain, that subconscious that's been absorbing story your entire life.
So how would you recommend a writer make the critical voice their bitch instead of the other way around?
I'll tell you, the critical voice never goes away, and it's sneaky. It comes in from all kinds of different ways. I would say, first off, for new writers who are getting their stuff out indie, never read a review, ever, 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 ever. No long-term professional writer ever reads their own reviews. Those things are just killers. And even a good review. A good review. Then you've got to feel like you've got your critical voice says, we better make this next story as good. It's just no matter whether it's good or bad. And it's just other people's opinions, and that doesn't matter. You're writing for yourself. And the second thing I would suggest you do is not rewrite. Just plan on making the first draft the best draft you can do, and not rewrite. Not touch it again, not look at it again, never look at it again. Write the next story. And so your focus is always, it's like you're walking a marathon. You're walking this long goal, and you always have to be walking forward. The minute you rewrite, what you have done is you have stopped, turned around, and walked in the other direction. and that's just, and boy, I'll tell you, that's not going to get you to any goals real quick, is if you're constantly stopping and turning around and going back. And that's what happens with writers, is they're constantly going backwards. And so I would highly recommend that you just do the best job you can do. Don't ever think you're writing crap while you're writing it. Just literally focus on doing the best work you can do while you're writing it. And then when you reach the end, release. Don't ever think about it again. And then do the best job you can on the next story. And then as you learn, it'll always be applied to the next story. You can't go back and fix the story. As Algis Budrus once said to me about a young writer, and he had this awful short story. We were in a workshop together. AJ and I were two of the pros. This poor young writer was so ego, and he had no hope. We knew he had no hope, and which is kind of sad to say. But when you're so wrapped up in your own ego, and he thought this work that he had turned in was fantastic.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And he just thought it was the best thing ever, and he had rewritten and polished it to death. And one of the things that happened with AJ is AJ got to AJ and he said, this would make a pretty good novel. And the guy just went away happy. And I asked AJ, we were walking down the hallway at this conference. I asked AJ, I said, why did you tell that writer to take that piece of garbage and turn it into a novel? And AJ looked at me and he said, if they have a pile of shit, tell them to make it into a larger pile of shit and they'll go away happy. From Algis Budrus. And I'm like, okay, got it. And that's sometimes what it just is. Sometimes that's just the nature of it.
Yeah.
If someone is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting on the same story over and over and over again, they got no hope, no long term.
And if he wasn't going to listen to anything other than something positive, if he told him something different, he wouldn't have heard it. Wouldn't have believed it. So just
wouldn't have believed it. Would have discounted it. We'd have been wrong.
Yeah.
Harlan Ellison on a manual typewriter, single draft, would sit in bookstore windows, and someone would give him just a word or a phrase or something, and he would write a short story sitting in a bookstore window, and he would pull the finished typed manuscript off and tape it to the window so people outside the store could read his story as he's writing it. And those things won major national awards in mystery, National Book Awards, all kinds of stuff, science fiction, Hugos. And he would write them one draft, never rewrite them, in a bookstore window in front of people on a manual typewriter.
That's performance art right there.
Yeah.
It's art, but it also shows that he was in complete control of, he didn't need the critical voice. And even though people were standing around reading what he was writing, he didn't care. His creative voice was in complete control.
That sounds a lot like Ray Bradbury as well.
He did exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Towards the problem with long term, and I'm one of them, and at some point I'll probably stop doing it. Most professional writers, when they get in front of younger writers at a conference or something, will tell them they're 3 or 4 draft writers. They'll lie to them. I do the same thing. I tell people, I'm a 3 draft writer. Well, my 3 drafts are I run through the book first and I get it done. Then I spell check it. That's a draft. Takes me about 20, 30 minutes because I don't have my spell checker on or my grammar checker on when I'm writing because that's just all critical voice. And then I spell check it to fix the spelling. And then I give it to my first reader, who happens to be my wife. She reads it. And if I agree with some of her comments, I fix her comments. That usually takes me about an hour. Or if she finds a typo or something, that's my 3rd draft. So my 2nd, 3rd draft usually take about 2 hours total.
That would work for my attention span as well. I like that.
Yep. So what are some upcoming fiction, nonfiction books you like to let people know about?
Boy, I'm doing so many things. I had 28 books come out last year.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. Kind of insane, huh? 12 of them, of course, were Smith's Monthly. I think if you want to really track in the different series and the different things I'm doing, and I'm going to be redesigning my blog here in the next 3 weeks to make it mobile friendly and all kinds of stuff like that. I think just either following my blog or get a copy of Smith's Monthly. And if you can, get the PDF, because that also shows all the ads and the layout and everything else inside of it, or get a paper copy, or electronic. But I think that's the best way because I don't know what I'm going to write next. I have no idea. Often I'll just sit down with a title. I often usually start everything with just a title. I'll come up with some goofy title and go, oh, that'll be interesting. Wonder what this one's about. And I'll write off into the dark. And that's why I did that book, because I never saw any other book that talked about people who just want to write to entertain themselves and not outline and not do all that boring stuff that English teachers tell you to do ahead of time.
Well, I like that. Very seldom do you hear people talk about writing in terms of just they enjoy writing. So you might be the only one I've ever really, well, I mean, since we've been interviewing people, we've met some more, but my whole life I've always been told no one likes writing. They like having written.
Oh no. Oh no.
And I that's how I was taught. I
can't imagine doing this if I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah,
no way.
and that's everything I've ever been taught. And that's the phrase that I've always been told was, well, you're not going to like writing. You will like having written. No. And I remember thinking, that sounds like any other crappy job that you could, you might as well just get some other crappy job where you're going to be getting a steady paycheck every week.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't really enjoy doing it.
No, again, pardon the slight profanity on different stuff, but my job description is I sit alone in a room, this room that I'm sitting here in, and I sit alone in a room and make shit up. And people pay me enormous amounts of money for a lot of years. I make more money than I ever want to think about making. And, because I sit here and make stuff up. Mm-hmm. And if I can't entertain myself, I'm certainly not going to entertain readers. If I already know where the ending is going, chances are the readers are going to know where the ending is going. Mm. And so I just act like a reader. I just entertain myself. And when I get done, I go, oh, that was a fun book. And then I start another one because I want to entertain myself again.
Now, writing as much as you do, about how many hours a day do you generally write?
Maybe 3.
Really?
Yeah. I have basically a full-time job. Otherwise, it's not, it just works out in hours. I mean, I don't, because I teach these online classes.
Oh, yeah.
So those take some time. And then I'm up at WMG playing around. We also, because I'm nuts, we have a store here in town, also a physical store that's part of WMG Publishing that has collectibles like toys and comics and all kinds of stuff like that, cars and you name it. And so I'm constantly in and around out there playing in the toys and playing with that. I don't run the store. I have a wonderful manager and he has an assistant running the store. But of course, I have to be out there because I'm a picker for that. So I'm constantly looking for new stuff. And in warehouse, we have 2 warehouses up at WMG that are part of the 7,000 square foot building. WMG Publishing has a 7,000 square foot building. 2 of the warehouses up there are completely full of comics and toys and books and you name it. And there's books on every wall up there. And we do a couple coast workshops up there in one of the big areas. But most of the WMG employees are scattered all over the country. So it's just basically a big empty building that I get to go play in and have a great time.
I would say that big empty building you just described, I think, is Marx's heaven. It's mine. That's what he imagines when the pearly gates open.
That's the problem was when you love collecting stuff and you have too much money. More money than sense.
Yeah, that's what we always say. Got more money than sense.
Yes.
You made me feel really guilty. I'm going to go write something now.
I write 3,000 to 4,000 words a day. That's about all. And some days I don't even get that much.
Consistency seems to be
if
the
you're
key.
consistently doing it, yeah. So
if you're consistent, it adds up to an enormous amount of words.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I feel completely inadequate right now.
I don't do it very long. In fact, I always feel guilty because I have a blue-collar work ethic, born and raised blue-collar, and so I should be working 8 hours a day, and getting my paycheck and all that sort of stuff. And I work 2 or 3 hours a day and just ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah, were you raised in the Midwest as well?
No, I was Idaho. Boise,
Idaho. Okay. Okay, wait, I was going to say that's we were blue-collar, Midwest, and I mean, I actually have gotten to where I feel guilty if I get paid for doing something I didn't hate, Yeah. It's like
that's part of that blue collar you have to train yourself out of, because if you really, really enjoy writing, you're going to think it's not work.
Yeah.
And if that's all you're doing, like I am, that's where all my money comes from. It's like, oh, I get to go play and they pay me money. That took me a lot of years to get past that blue collar work ethic of it must be miserable before it's worth a paycheck.
Right. And you must be, force yourself out of bed at an ungodly hour, even if you're not as productive then. And if you enjoyed it, you should feel guilty.
You should feel guilty. Yeah, absolutely. That often will take, and to be honest with you, I've told many writers to go get counseling, because that takes counseling to get past, because that's how we were born and raised.
Yeah.
And boy, I'll tell you, that can stop your writing faster than anything, is that, oh, this is fun, so it can't be worth anything.
Right.
It has no value.
Has no value, yeah.
I thought you're supposed to be tortured souls.
and that's
People are like, oh, that's nice. So what do you really, what's
what
your
do you
real
really
job?
do?
What's
Yeah.
your real
Well,
job?
I still get that all the time. Someone will say, what do you do? And usually I don't say, I say, oh, I work in publishing, and they're happy and they walk away.
Oh.
But if they press me and I say, oh, I'm a writer, then the first question out of their mouth is, oh, what are you working on? What book are you working on? And have I read anything you've read? Well, probably not, because you're probably illiterate, but I don't say that to them. But that's the kind of stuff that never goes away. Even after 40 years, I'm still getting that.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing, I don't think we gave the URL for your website. Your
Yeah,
blog.
where can people find your site?
Oh, DeanWesleySmith.com. It's DEAN, and then Wesley is WESLEY Smith.com. They don't have any links to any of my books or anything up there. I got some Smith's Monthlies there. That's all going to be changing in the next month or so. It is the worst author site. I have no links to any of my books anywhere on that site.
I have to say,
So you're
I have a
successful
Smith's.
in spite of
Yeah,
yourself.
SmithsMonthly.com is where you can find at least how to subscribe to Smith's Monthly, or just grab a copy off of Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Kobo or one of those places. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're so basically what you're saying is you're successful in spite of yourself, not really.
Oh, 100%. I actually did modern things, like had a website that actually promoted my books. Oh, wow. Wouldn't that be something?
What a novel idea.
I'm going to get there. People have been badgering me now for a couple of years to say, Dean, you might want to have links to your novels on your website, or at least a page. Yeah,
Hey,
I'll get
some
to
of
it.
us, we feel your pain. I'm not a very good online social networking kind of person. I don't know. I'm with you.
Yeah,
You're
I have
not
a
the only one.
Twitter account and a Facebook page, and
You got more than I do.
I visit them once in a while.
Yeah.
I don't think I've done a tweet, and I don't remember when, but there's a whole thousands of people follow me on Twitter. I have no idea why. I don't do anything.
You're like, what are they following?
Yeah. Chris says, well, just go
Into
be
the dark.
social. I'm like, no, I don't want to be.
They're following you into the dark.
Yeah.
And it's
I'm going
quiet.
to just sit in my room, write things.
well, it's been great speaking with you.
It has been. Thank you so much. We really,
Thank you, guys.
really did enjoy this. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And thank you very much for having me.
Hi, I'm supernatural thriller author J.F. Penn, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Well, big thanks to Dean for the fun interview, and if any of those fiction or nonfiction books or his monthly magazine sound interesting to you, we encourage you to try them out.
We are getting closer and closer to our 100th episode. We hope to make it a special episode with a few of our past guests joining us again. Until then, we have some really great upcoming episodes with editor, publisher, literary agent, and writer Sean Coyne. We'll be discussing his information-packed new nonfiction book, The Story Grid: What Good Editors Know. We also have a really fun-filled episode coming up with the hosts of the web series Super Geeked Up, Jeff, Tanya, and Nicole. For a couple years now, their show's been interviewing web series creators on a weekly basis. Inspired by their game-filled show, we made this episode a GenreTainment The Game Show episode.
Woohoo!
As we quiz them on geeky culture. Oh, the laughs and the tears it brought.
Tears of laughter or tears of sorrow? We're not really sure. Now, before we go, we want to remind you that you can keep track of us on our GenreTainment Facebook page, Marks' Twitter account, which is @MrMarks, our website at GenreTainment.com, or all of the shows at SciFiPulseRadio.com.
So that's it for today's GenreTainment. We'll be back soon with all new guests from our favorite films, TV shows, novels, and web series.
GenreTainment is a production of Alien Jungle Bug Productions.
Until next time.
Bad monkey.